it's Mrs. Hewing here. I have something a little different for you today. Sometimes when you hear the beginning of a book, you decide whether or not it's the book you want to read. So for today, I want to go ahead and read to you the first few chapters of Ugly, a memoir by Robert Hoge. After you hear these chapters, maybe you'll decide that this is the book you want to check out from the library. Introduction. I guess you could call this the story of my story. The proper "this is Robert's big, exciting life of ugliness" story starts just a couple of pages beyond this. But I wanted to write an introduction for this special edition of Ugly to tell you some of the reasons why I wrote the book. If you'd rather skip ahead and read about my actual life first, that's fine. This will be here when you finish. I'll wait. When I was growing up, I had no idea that I would ever have a story worth telling, let alone one people might want to read or listen to. First of all, there was just too much life to be living. Making new friends, fighting with my brothers and sisters, wondering if I'd ever make it onto the football team, and getting into mischief. Beneath those parts of my childhood, though, the ugly little pieces of my story were falling into place. Eventually, my life became my story, and I decided there were more reasons to write ugly than to leave it unwritten. The first reason was the simplest. I love telling stories. Storytelling is the crazy glue that holds us all together. Stories can soar and sing and surprise, and sometimes, when we share our own stories, they do all three at once. My story certainly had a surprising start. I was born with a massive tumor in the middle of my face and 2 deformed legs. My parents weren't initially sure what to do with me, and my doctors didn't even know if I'd live very long. Understanding my parents' initial feelings and sharing a little bit of their story with others who may have faced a similar situation was the second major reason for writing my story. The final reason I wrote Ugly is the most important. I wanted to talk to you, readers, about what it means to grow up looking and feeling different. Too often adults try to suggest that differences in appearance don't matter by pretending they simply don't exist, but you and I know the world looks different. Why? Because we are different. We don't have to define ourselves solely by our differences, but we don't have to ignore them either. It's also worth saying that most books are a little bit of a lie, even when the story they're telling is true. Lives in books often look like a completed jigsaw puzzle. Even if the puzzle was messy to start with, by the end of the book, all the pieces magically fall into place. Like puzzle pieces, lives in books have some sharp corners, some curvy parts, and some straight edges. One piece clicks into another, and the picture they make becomes clear and complete. When you're in the middle of actually living your life, however, there's no picture of what it should look like at the end to guide your choices. Few people know what the big picture of their life is going to look like while they're living it. I certainly didn't when I was growing up. I questioned a lot of my choices and often wondered if I had done the right thing. The answers only seem obvious when you get to the end of the book, when you turn the last page and the puzzle suddenly looks complete. Life is not a book, though. If you're different from other kids, don't worry about the jigsaw puzzle. Don't judge yourself by everyone else's seemingly beautiful picture. And don't worry if your final picture doesn't seem clear or if the edges around your story don't seem sharp. It might become clear later. Maybe it will remain entirely random until the very last piece slots into place, when everything becomes beautifully obvious. Or maybe the puzzle pieces won't ever seem to entirely fit together at all. All of that's okay. None of us knows which bits of our lives will slot nicely together while we are living them. We are all a bit worried sometimes, confused at other times. Even if our books make our lives seem magical, the solution is simple. Be unafraid of living. The puzzle pieces will take care of themselves. Chapter 1. The Art of Being Ugly. Imagine you're in art class. The teacher drops a lump of wet, sticky clay on the bench in front of you. "You've got 30 minutes to sculpt a newborn baby's face," she says. Everyone in the class waits, wondering if there are more instructions to come. Go! You grab the lump of clay and try to figure out where to start. First, better get the size right. You start tearing big chunks of clay off until the size looks okay, and then you tackle the overall shape. There's a big bulge on one side that you need to press hard with the palm of your hand to fix. When that looks about right, you shape the face itself and smooth the forehead. Next, you cracked a chin and pushed the clay with your thumb to add a little dimple. As you start to sculpt details, soft cheeks, a lovely small nose, perfect ears, eyes that are closed because you decide this newborn baby is asleep, you realize your sculpture is coming together just right. Time's almost up, your teacher says. Your hands are racing across the clay. You've got just enough time to finish a few special touches, like eyebrows and a wisp of hair on top of the baby's head. There's grit under your fingernails and your hands are sticky from the clay, but it doesn't matter. You look down and see a beautiful day-old baby in front of you. This is going to be an A+ assignment. Then out of the corner of your eye, you see someone running towards you. It's that one kid in class who really hates you. Yep, that one. Turns out he's so jealous of how good a job you've done that he rushes towards your sculpture. You reach out to stop him, but it's too late. He shoves a ball of clay right in the middle of the face you've made. You hear a soft squelch and then gasp as you see the damage the attack has done. Your sculpture looks ruined. The little nose you made has been squashed by a giant clay splotch spread across the face. It has been pushed so hard into the face that the beautiful eyes you made are now way farther apart than they should be. The extra time you put into getting the size and shape of the head just right is totally wasted too. It's bumpy and broken. Imagine what that sculpture looks like now, and you'll know what I looked like when I was born. I'm the ugliest person you've ever met. It wasn't supposed to be that way. No one had any idea what was coming. My parents had 4 children before me, and I should have been born plain and simple on a Friday. But July 21st, 1972, came and almost went without much to show for it. As midnight neared, however, my mother, Mary Hoge, went into labor. My parents didn't own a telephone, so Mom rushed next door and asked the neighbors to call my father, Vince, home from work. Dad raced back from his job at the factory that made food for chickens. They had no time to spare. It would take them about half an hour to reach the hospital from our suburban Brisbane home. My father arrived, jumped out of the car into the dark night, and ran upstairs. He packed my mother into the car as fast as he could, and they left for the hospital. When Mom was admitted, her contractions that signaled the baby was coming were 2 minutes apart. Her baby should be there very soon, but at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, the contractions stopped dead. The doctors were worried and told my parents they might have to induce labor if the contractions didn't start. Mom was sent to the hospital ward to wait. At 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, July 23rd, her contractions resumed. It was a long, difficult labor for a 5th baby, and I was born at 12:35 p.m. Back then, a mother's usual first question would have been, "Is it a boy or a girl?" But something didn't seem quite right, so my mother had a different question for the doctors. "Is my baby okay?" she asked. "No, Mrs. Hoge," the doctor said, looking up in shock. "He's not okay. He has a lump on his head and something wrong with his legs." The lump was a massive bulge that jutted out from the top of my forehead and ran all the way down to the tip of where my nose should have been. It was almost twice the size of my newborn fist. It had formed early during my development and made a mess of my face, pushing my eyes to either side of my head like a fish. That wasn't all. Looking down at me, the doctors saw that both my legs were mangled. The right leg was only 3/4 as long as it should have been and had a small foot bent forward at a very strange angle. The foot had 4 toes, and 2 of them were partially joined together. My left leg was even shorter and only had 2 toes. Both looked bent and broken. I didn't get a hug from Mom before she sent me away, but I did get a name before she'd even laid eyes on me: Robert Vincent Hoge. Dad had already visited me on his own by the time he saw Mom. When he described how I looked, they both burst into tears. "Perhaps he'll die," Mary said to her husband. Growing up on his parents' farm, Vince had birthed plenty of calves and lambs. He knew I might be an ugly baby, a baby with a tremendous number of problems, but he also knew his son was a fighter. "No chance. He's too strong and healthy," he said. That didn't stop my mother feeling awful about it all, though. The next day was her birthday, and she'd expected a perfect baby as the best present ever. Instead, she got a little monster. I was sent to the hospital's intensive care ward, ugly and alone. Chapter 2, Left Behind. As soon as I arrived at the intensive care ward, doctors started lots of medical tests. They attached me to machines to check my breathing and my heart rate. They poked and prodded my body to try to find out if all my internal organs were where they should be. Then they started trying to work out if I could see and hear, and if my brain was damaged. The one thing they rushed to discover was whether my deformities were blocking the flow of fluid that helps cushion the spine and brain. If that happened, my head would swell up like a balloon and I would die in a few days. There would be no way of fixing it. Doctors at the hospital answered most of those questions quickly. There were no problems with my heart or lungs or other internal organs that they could see. All my mysteries were written on the outside of my body. Why did I have a massive tumor squished across my face? Why were my legs deformed? Would I be able to walk? I was also the subject of a lot of questions people were asking my mother. Everyone wanted to know when she would come and see me. Every time she was asked if she wanted to leave the mother's ward to go see her baby in intensive care, her answer was the same. No. I wish he would go away or die or something, Mom explained later, when she started writing some of her thoughts down. Worse than that, Mom had decided she wanted to leave me in the hospital. I just wanted to be finished with it all, she said. I told the hospital staff I didn't want my baby. I wouldn't, under any circumstances, take it home. There were other normal kids at home to think about, after all, my brothers and sisters. Dad was at home looking after them. Michael was just 4 days away from turning 10 when I was born. Gary was 8, Paula 7, and Catherine 4. Dad told them about me. The new baby is a boy, he said, but he has some health problems and may not live long. They asked what was wrong with me. He's got problems with his face, and his legs are small and not properly formed, Dad said. But he's only a baby yet, and they will grow, Michael said. That's not how it works, Michael, Dad told him. After I'd been in the intensive care ward for about a week, one of the doctors visiting Mom sensed something different about the way she was feeling. The doctor asked my mother if she would finally like to see her baby. Mom knew there was something terribly wrong with me. Until she saw me, though, the pain and grief only needed to exist in her mind. Her feelings were real enough, but with an unseen, distant cause. If she pretended I didn't exist, maybe those bad feelings would just go away. But before she'd thought it through, Mom said yes, she'd go see me. Together, she and the doctor walked to my ward. Mom slowed down as she got closer and closer, not knowing exactly what to expect. The doctors and my dad had described me to her, but she still hadn't seen me with her own eyes, not even a photograph. She walked into my ward and saw other normal-looking babies in their small cots. The doctor guided my mother over to where I was. My mother looked down on me for the first time and saw the large tumor that had robbed her of a baby's perfection. She saw my 2 widely spread eyes and my splayed nostrils. She saw my deformed legs and bent toes. Mom looked at me again and decided she did not care about her son, about me. I didn't feel anything for this baby, she wrote in her diary. I had shut off completely. I had made up my mind I was not taking him home. She packed her bags and left the hospital without me. I had my first operation when I was 5 days old. Surgeon Lee Atkinson operated to see what was behind the tumor that had caused so many problems with my face. Afterward, he told my parents my brain seemed okay and I should have a normal lifespan. Medical staff then began to tell Mom about advances in surgical procedures. There's so much more that can be done these days, a nurse told her. We can do a lot to help fix Robert, another surgeon said. They were not the words a mother who had just given birth wanted to hear. Mom began phoning anyone she thought might help her refuse to take me. She called her member of parliament and then her local doctor. The doctor's advice was very clear. Put him into a home, the doctor said. You have 4 other children and it's just not worth it. She asked whether he could make that sort of judgment without having ever seen me. Yes, he said. No doubt he would be better off in a home. Don't even consider bringing him home. Just forget him. My father figured Mom should be the one to decide, since she'd be looking after me most of the time. You'll have my full support, whatever decision you make, Dad said. The hospital made an appointment for Mom to meet with a social worker and discuss the situation. Mom didn't show up. I remained in the hospital unwanted and unloved. Mom started to visit more often, but she was still terribly unhappy and couldn't bring herself to take me home. One day after a visit, she cried and told her sister in a moment of desperation and honesty, "He is so ugly." Mom kept asking other people what she should do. No one gave her an answer. They all said the same thing. It was her decision and they would support her whatever she did. Over the next few weeks, she realized she had to approach the situation more rationally. She had to think the issues through, address them, and then decide. It was a decision that would affect the whole family, every aspect of their lives for a very long time. Finally, Dad and Mom agreed they should explain to my brothers and sisters exactly what was wrong with me and give everyone a chance to have their say. One Saturday morning, my parents sat down with their 4 older children and had a family discussion. They explained the situation, describing what I looked like and what was wrong with my legs. They talked for a long time, and when they finished, the whole family was crying. Then came the big question. Mom pointed at my eldest brother Michael and asked, "Should we bring Robert home?" Michael paused, silent for a few seconds while everyone watched and waited. "Yes," he said. "And you?" Mom asked and pointed at Gary. "Yes," Gary said. Then came Paula. "Yes," she said. Finally, Mom pointed at Catherine. "Should we bring Robert home?" Mom asked. Catherine paused. "Yes," Catherine said, but she was only 4 years old and mostly thought she should say yes because that's what everyone else had said first. A few days after that, the whole family came to visit me in the hospital, and my brothers and sisters each had a turn holding me. Not one of them changed their mind about bringing me home. There was concern and curiosity on their young faces, but all of it was for me, not for themselves. My sister Paula doesn't remember the way I looked being a major issue for my siblings when I first came home. "You were a baby, and it was just the way you were," she said. Mom started to understand that she had been focusing on what other people might think of her new baby. "My worry and my concern were more a matter of pride than anything else," Mom said. She started thinking about how she might have reacted if my problems were on the inside rather than the outside. If Robert had a serious medical problems within, I never would have hesitated to accept him. But because he looked different, I found it so terribly hard, she said later. Mom realized it wouldn't be the last tough decision she would have to make about my future. It was not going to be easy. She knew it would mean battles for her and for me. But she had made up her mind. It was August 28th, 1972, a month and 5 days after I had been born, and I was finally going home.